Welcome to episode number 1 of a new little podcast that I'm going to do here. It's called Ghost Panther, okay? The Ghost Panther podcast. Ghost Panther actually is like the name of like a Marvel comic book villain or something, and he's like also a video game character. But I looked it up, and as long as it's not in the same market competing directly, the name is fine to use. So Ghost Panther is the name that kept coming. Now, what this podcast is going to be is every episode is going to be a ghost story because I'm super into ghost stories. I always have been, but I never really wanted to talk about them because I was going through like a lot of religious deconstruction and I didn't know if I believed in ghosts or if I believed in God or any of that stuff, and I just didn't want to. It was just kind of like painful, I guess, to get into. But secretly, personally, I've always been super interested in ghosts. And I listen to a ghost podcast every single night to go to sleep. And so that's kind of what this is going to be, like a long form podcast talks about ghost stories. And then we're going to share an NDE. And then we're going to share a cryptid encounter. And this includes alien abductions and things like that. Okay, I hope that the audio is good. More light required. Who cares? Okay, so the first thing that I want to talk about, and by the way, the email is ghostpantherpodcast@gmail.com. And so if you have a really cool ghost story, or if you have a beautiful NDE or a vivid NDE that you've had or a loved one has had, or you have a cryptid encounter that hasn't been shared anywhere else, it doesn't even matter if it has been shared. Send it to me at ghostpantherpodcast@gmail.com. Now, right now, obviously, this is the first video, and this is the first episode, and we don't have emails yet. So what I'm going to do is share some of my favorite ghost stories, and I'm going to talk about kind of how I feel about them. Also, I'm not interested in ghost stories that are like super scary or creepy or traumatizing or horrific. If they're horrific and traumatizing and intriguing and interesting and captivating, if they make you think and they make you think about, if they're like revealing in some way about maybe the nature of ghosts or the nature of consciousness, then I'll be interested. But like, I have no interest in trying to make ghosts or anything look creepy. And I feel like people trying to make everything into a monster and everything creepy, I feel like that's already a saturated market. And also I'm bored of that space. I'm bored of it. So I'm going to talk a lot about like consciousness, higher consciousness, and those types of things. But I'm somebody who doesn't believe in demons. I don't believe in Satan. I'm not a Christian, but I am fascinated with the paranormal. And I always kind of feel the call and the pull of the paranormal. Here's the other thing that I'm not going to do. I'm not going to go into I don't like conspiracies. Paranormal is separate and distinct from conspiracies. Okay, this is too long of a prologue or whatever. Let's get into it. Ghost story, near-death experience, and cryptid. Okay, here it goes. This one is January 27, 1996. Skiing in Aspen, Colorado. This guy is trying to impress his girlfriend. He smacks into a pine tree. He's immediately floating above his body. No bizarre sensations, just still in the scene. Now, this is why I love near-death experiences. This is just such a... this honestly is very average. I've studied thousands and thousands of near-death experiences. Very average, but just the little details. I love this. This is a teenager, by the way. I think this guy's like 16 years old, 16, 17 years old. So he's immediately floating above his body. He's still in the scene, and he describes like just waiting for the ski patrol to get there. And he could see that they were struggling to get up the mountain and they were going slow. And he's just frustrated, kind of just in the scene. He's watching his girlfriend do CPR on him. He sees there's a gash in his head. She takes off her hat, tries to prop it below his head in the snow, and her hat just turns red. So there's like serious head trauma and head injuries. And some of the crowd is gathering, and they're like, "Oh, I see blood." And he looked around. He could see that people were concerned. His girlfriend was concerned. He could see people's thoughts and emotions, which was normal. He had no idea. It just didn't dawn on him, apparently, that he was dead. And again, this is common. This is so interesting. Sometimes when people die, they have like a family member show up, someone that they know or trust, or a loved one. And if that's not the case, maybe they'll have like a religious figure show up, like Krishna or Jesus or someone. Okay. But sometimes, and this this is just so interesting to me, sometimes nobody shows up. You come out of your body and you float around and you just do random things for a time. And so this story is just so freaking cool. I just like it. So now the ski patrol puts his body on a stretcher, okay? And they start going down the mountain and he's following behind him, just hearing the skis and the snow as they go down the mountain. He's still in the scene. He's concerned. He's not sad or horrified. In fact, he kind of feels like what's the word? Ambivalent about it. He just feels almost disconnected, but concerned, like a group project at school. Like, oh shit, like let's get this done. Like, all right, he's stressed out. He's also aware it's his body and that the body is dying, but he's not in extreme suffering at all. He's just concerned, and this slowly changes over time. So when they get to the bottom of the mountain, they're at the first aid station. They call the ambulance. It's taken forever. And his girlfriend is talking to the ski patrol. And he later tells her about that conversation, which really disturbs her. This whole story actually disturbed her so much, it affected their relationship and they broke up. When he came back and he told her all this weird ghostly stuff that had happened, it just really got under her skin. He's like, what is taking the freaking ambulance so long? And he just flies into town. Again, nonchalantly, not realizing he's dead. And he sees, as he's apparently in the sky, he sees the ambulance ambling its way up the mountain. The ambulance is ambling. And he flies down behind it. And just nonchalantly, he's following behind this ambulance as it takes all the curves going up the mountain from behind the ambulance. And it's not occurring to him. This is also natural. This is just happening with his thoughts and his intentions. It's also natural. It doesn't occur to him that any of this is weird yet. It's like slowly he's like waking up though, and you'll see what happens. We think it's so weird that somebody wouldn't realize that they're dead. But do you ever realize you're dreaming? No. I mean, you maybe have a lucid dream, but generally the weirdest thing starts happening and you're just totally on board with it. There's no jarring. And I get the sense that this is how death is for a lot of people. They don't have, it's not actually jarring. It feels more home-like. It feels familiar. And so that's just something that kind of plays out in this story. But he gets in the ambulance. He's actually going in and out of the ambulance as it goes down the mountain. And there's a huge storm. And the ambulance driver is swerving, is trying not to slide around these corners. And he's swearing and he's getting all tense and scared. And this guy, this ghost person, he's watching his body die. He's watching his girlfriend. He's watching the driver. He's watching EMS workers or whatever. And he can see into the fear of the driver. And he starts yelling at the driver because he doesn't feel like he's being safe enough. And while he's doing this, he's kind of going in and out of the ambulance. And he notices, as he's yelling and then he's pointing down the road, he notices the snow in the blizzard is going through his arm. It's coming through his arm. Now, this is the first time that he kind of starts to wake up and says, wait a second. What exactly is happening right now? And then he looks at his arm itself and the darn thing is glowing. It's glowing. That's a slight glow. And he sees that he's like half out of the ambulance as he's like standing next to the driver. And he's kind of been going in and out of the ambulance this whole time. And never did he consider, he knew that the body that was dying was his. He knew that body was his, and he knew that it was dying, and he could see all of it. But he just never considered that he himself was now dead, and he was leaving this space completely. he didn't really totally consider that. And so it starts to dawn on him. Then everything starts turning on consciously. He starts waking up, and this whole layer of reality just deconstructs. And now he's aware of this larger base layer of reality, this like super reality, this higher dimension in space. It's cool that he says in space. He says he saw this other dimension in space. Just meaning, to me, what that means is I appreciate it because we can't see everything even in space, even in our own universe. In 3D time and space, we probably perceive like very, very little. And so anyway, I don't know what he meant by that, but at this point, once he's really waking up to this new reality, his worry and his concern for this whole situation with his body just completely vanishes. And the discussion here to have is like, why does it vanish for him and not for these other ghosts that stay behind? Some people are really invested in the narrative, really invested in the stories. They want to stay attached to their identity as a human, which must be really disturbing for them as they watch their body rot away into nothing, like trying to stay attached to this thing that's now dead, and the people that knew it are now dead, and the frameworks that it used to believe in are now changed and different. And maybe for some ghosts, it takes a long time to deconstruct from whatever it is. Some people, it happens just instantaneously. They just disconnect. They release. They say, no, I'm perfectly okay. In fact, I feel more familiar going this way towards this consciousness or whatever than staying. The human experience was the alien experience, and this conscious experience, that's more me. So I'm okay, like piecing out with the earth. Let the earth go away for a little while, and I'm going to go into heaven or whatever. I'm going to go to somewhere else in the universe that's a lot more happy and all those things. So this guy accepts the separation. And I'm just thinking maybe some people don't. I mean, I don't have the answers. I'm just kind of wondering about this. He feels like out of his body, he's back home. He's familiar. It's warm. He says he belonged to this higher place. Like inherently, it was his real identity. It was who he was. Then there was a loving entity by him. Through telepathy, the entity says, do you want to stay? And like a teenager, this is like such a teenager thing to do. He goes, if I go now, would there be a problem in returning later? Actually, it's kind of understandable because a lot of our ideologies on the earth, like Christianity or capitalism, but obviously, especially Christianity, there's this idea that it's a fear-based idea that you're going to be punished forever, or you're going to be screwed in for whatever reason or whatever technicality. Maybe you just weren't morally good enough, whatever. Maybe you didn't have the right religion, the right faith. Maybe you didn't confess to Jesus in the right way. Whatever it is, you're not going to be saved. You won't be saved because you have to be saved because you're condemned otherwise. So you kind of have to get saved somehow. You got to end up being saved. And it's like this idea that we might not make it back. It's obviously very fear-based. I call it a Bronze Age human sacrifice idea. I'm not a Christian, and I have left religion, and I feel that a lot of religion is deeply unhelpful to the human experience. In fact, traumatizing, fear-inducing, anxiety-inducing. Anyway, so this teenager, he's like, well, hey, like if I go now, like, would there be a problem like returning, or is there going to be like some like, what's the catch? Like, I want to come back here. And this is the perfect thing that happens. This loving entity looks at him, smiles, and then just laughs in his face. He just laughs. He chuckles at the question because it's so silly to think that the very thing that you are, your own identity, he's a part of this place inherently, innately, deeply. He's a part of this place. It is him. It's so weird to think you won't come back to what you are, that somehow you can be barred from your own identity, which is this place. So to a higher entity, it's just funny. If you're going back to a planet where they believe that everyone is going to be condemned and tormented for all eternity, infinite torment for finite crimes. If you're going back to a planet that has such a fear-based ideology, it would be silly. And I can just see why somebody would laugh at that. I just can see it. I think it's weird and funny that we don't see it. Why can't we see that a lot of this religious ideology that we're still so entrenched in as a species, why can't we see that it's fear-based and it's coming right out of the Bronze Age? Here's the thing. With this podcast, I'm going to talk about afterlife and stuff like that outside of a Christian framework. And that's going to be very, very uncomfortable for lots of people. So look, just don't, if it's making you uncomfortable, just don't listen. Just don't watch. Don't watch. I would rather be offensive and be myself than mask who I am to not be offensive. So right after the being laughs at him, boom, he's back in his body and the near-death experience is over. He had a severe concussion and he was out for 13 hours from this concussion. Dang. After that, his personality changed. He became very spiritual and curious about religious ideology and philosophy and near-death experiences and those types of things. And he broke up with his girlfriend over it. So it's an interesting story. I really like it. I think it's really interesting that some people become ghosts and some people pass and detach very easily, intuitively. I think that's pretty cool. It's just interesting. This next story is about a Sasquatch. Oh my God, Sasquatch. I'm talking about Sasquatch again. I have to talk about Sasquatch because it's very, very, very hard to deny that there is an actual phenomenon happening in this space. I would say impossible. And then beyond that, you can experience it yourself, kind of probably like, a poltergeist or a haunting or something. You go to enough haunted places throughout your life, you'll probably experience something somewhere along the line. You'll probably experience something. So it's not something that is isolated from us. We can interact with this phenomenon. So I do take Sasquatch very seriously. And I spent years explaining why I take it seriously. But anyway, this is a Sasquatch story and it's freaking amazing. This 7-year-old boy walks up into the woods following a little creek. And this is at a brand new cabin that's built in the Ozarks deep into a cove. It's pretty remote. And this is a brand new cabin. So, there could have been things that lived there on the land and they were undisturbed. So he follows this stream up there. He gets to a puddle, and this is Sasquatch Chronicles episode 1017, by the way. This is just the most amazing thing. It's an hour and 20 minutes in 1962. The guy's from Southern Illinois. So I don't know if his real name is Tom, but Tom, 7 years old, goes up, sees this pond, this small pond. And there is like this person, animal thing across the pond. It's a small pond. I'm assuming this is like 10 to 20 feet away. And its back is to the 7-year-old child. Its back is to Tom. And it's hulking and it's huge. But it's going, la, 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 la. It's making it very clear. This creature is making it very clear that he's just playing. He's playing. So he's doing exaggerated up and down motions. He's splashing his hands in the water and he's laughing and he's doing these playful things. It was very clear that he was like frolicking and playing, but not turning around. He's keeping his back to the child. And so once the creature made it clear that he was playing, he goes, oh, and he crouches down to one side, reaches his hand in the water and snatches something, and he brings it up out of the water, and it's freaking Crawdad. Okay? And then he looks to the other side. He's this whole time he's being really exaggerated with all of his motions. His arm, oh, and he reaches down into the water, snatches something, brings it up, and now he has a Crawdad in the other hand. He has 2 Crawdads. And he reaches them high above his head, and he goes, da, 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 da. But it high above his head so the kid behind him can see that he's playing with these Crawdads, that he's having fun. Okay? Smashing them together. And then he goes like this. He turns to the side so the kid gets a profile, and he opens his mouth as much as he can. And he chomps the whole thing down. The Crawdad, the shell, everything. He chomps it down. And he turns to the other side, chomps that one down. And the kid behind him is a little bit scared by this because his mouth was so darn big. He said it was like Pac-Man. Okay. But he knows now that this is not a human. He knows that it's not a bear or anything. This is like a giant ape creature. I think he said it was a monster. But trying to be playful and intentionally never facing the child, but doing all of this theatrics and this playful behavior and being silly clearly for the child. And then he turns after this whole display's over and he ate the crawdads. He turns, and not only does he give the kid a profile, but he turns about a quarter more. He's not facing the kid. I would imagine that he knows that would startle the child. It would make it very, very, and this whole time he's trying to de-escalate the impact his presence will have on a child. And he turns kind of almost facing the kid. He reaches his hand backwards under his arm and he beckons for the kid to come. Is that scary? What was he going to do? Was he going to eat the kid? I mean, the thing is, there's been a couple other, I've listened to thousands and thousands of Sasquatch encounters. Everybody who knows my past knows that I was obsessed with Sasquatch for a long time. And I've read through and I've listened to thousands and thousands of Sasquatch encounters. And there's been several where kids played in the lake or the water, or they would go play in the woods with Sasquatch, a large Sasquatch and like small juvenile Sasquatch. So it's not at all unheard of. So if you're the 7-year-old, what would you have done? Would you have walked to the Sasquatch, or would you have pieced out? Would you nope it out of there? And the kid ran off. He scampered off. He said, by the way, the face was handsome, and it was not a frightening face. It was human looking, but not human. It was not quite human. And the thing is that, you know, there's so many different iterations of hominids and hominins over the last, say, 300,000 years, you know, and it's just not weird for us to see another hominid creature that's not quite human. To me, that's not weird, but we're supposed to be the only upright humans left. There should be no other human groups on the earth. And it seems that the way that I kind of see Sasquatch is that it is a part of nature, and it is a very consistent phenomenon that is real. And yet it seems to be around some type of corner. It seems maybe it's a stretch to say it's in a different dimension, but it's because clearly it's interacting with our dimension, and it seems to be physical in a lot of the encounters. But there are all the stories of telepathy, of disappearing, and of other, like, lots of strange orbs and UFOs and stuff that kind of sometimes are linked to the Sasquatch phenomenon. But to me, it seems like it is something that is here, genuinely here in this 3D space, just like we are here, but we are not conscious of it. And it's somewhere around the limits of our consciousness, of our ability to perceive, of our ability to be conscious of reality. So it is just as real as we are. It seems like a very real part of reality, but it's in a part of nature that is somehow outside of our perception, almost like it's around a corner or something. And I don't know how to explain it beyond that. I don't know what a Sasquatch is. And that story seems to very clearly demonstrate that this thing was very thoughtful and conscientious of the type of interaction that he was having with this child. Like he said, he probably saw the child coming down on the road, and he saw that he was following up he was coming up the spring, and he decided, okay, I'm gonna look like I'm playing, and I'm gonna keep my back to him. You know, it shows that he was highly intelligent, that he was conscious of navigating the psychology of another ape, perhaps a lower ape, a lesser ape, a less aware ape. I'm not going to say lesser ape, but like, it seems that obviously of the two species of ape, of upright ape, We are the one that is unconscious. They are the one that is aware of us, and we are mostly unaware of them. So that makes them more aware. Between the two of us, they are more aware. And I don't know how this fits in with a lot of the more aggressive Sasquatch stuff. I don't know how it fits in with Sasquatch rummaging through dumpsters and garbages and stuff. How are you going to have a more conscious ape going through trash? I don't know. So I'm not saying that I know definitively like that Sasquatch is some majestic higher entity, but it seems that if you really think about the phenomenon and you really listen to a lot of these encounters, and this encounter, I believe, then you're going to end up kind of coming to some type of conclusion that this ape is kind of mentally in a different space than we are, and it is highly aware, and even physically it kind of is in a different space somehow. And that's all I can say for now. That's all I can say. With Sasquatch telepathy disappearances, and with aliens telepathy and disappearances. And on my next episode, I'm going to talk about the coolest freaking alien abductions. Oh my gosh. So episode 2, I will tell you this. A person's father, let me just say, a friend contacted me. Their father had abduction experiences. He wrote them down and gave them to me. And I am going to read them. And there's like 15, he filled out like 15 little pages. And there's like a bunch of different instances of abductions. And this is going to be brand new to the internet. It's going to be brand new. And these are really, really cool stories. So that's going to be episode 2. By the way, if you have weird, intriguing, strange little stories about cryptids or alien abductions, or really interesting ghost stories or haunting stories, send them please to ghostpantherpodcast@gmail.com. I should have been pitching that throughout this whole thing. ghostpantherpodcast@gmail.com. Okay. Email them in so that I can read through them and share them on my show. ghostpantherpodcast@gmail.com. Email me your stories. Okay, that's all. And I will see you in episode 2. Bye-bye.